What if the Gospel of John isn't just telling you who Jesus is, but showing you what reality actually is? Because John doesn't open with a baby in a manger. He opens with a cosmic headline. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then he starts documenting things that don't fit inside a purely material world. Water obeys, blind eyes open, a dead man stands up and walks out like death got evicted. So tonight on Sunday Supernatural Sit Rep, we're going to treat John the way John wants to be treated. Not like a bedtime story, but more like a dossier, a chain of supernatural signs that keeps asking one question. If this is true, what else have we been ignoring? And here's the part that'll mess with you a little. What if these weren't just miracles back then, but patterns you can still recognize right now? All right. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and you already know what time it is. This is Sunday Supernatural Sit Rep, the weekly ritual where we take the Bible seriously enough to admit it's not always safe, not always wrapped up in a tidy little bow, and definitely not always explainable. Tonight, we're stepping into the Gospel of John. Supernatural signs, and I'm telling you up front, John is a little different. Matthew's got a family line. Luke's got the nativity scene. Mark kicks the door in with action. But John starts like he's reading the universal Miranda warning. Okay, like your Miranda rights. In the beginning was the Word. That isn't poetic fluff. That's a claim about the operating system, about who wrote the code. And lately, people are starting to notice, again, the world feels weird. Like the air is straight up heavy, like everyone's exhausted, like headlines are coming in faster than our nervous system can absolutely process. Right now, people are hungry for something solid, something true, something that doesn't shift every time the algorithm shifts. And that's why John matters this week, because the signs in John don't feel like cute church stories. They feel like controlled breaches, like moments when the spiritual realm just stops being theory and starts being observable. Water becomes wine, not because Jesus is showing off, but because creation recognizes authority. A man born blind sees again, and the story quietly exposes how many people with functioning eyes are still blind. And Lazarus comes out of the tomb, and suddenly you realize John isn't just talking about life after death. He's talking about power over death. So here's the question we're going to carry through this episode. If John is presenting Jesus as the creator, stepping into his creation, then what do his supernatural signs reveal about the world we're living in and the one that we just can't see? And listen, if this episode hits you in the gut, do me a favor. Like the episode, share it, leave a review. That's not me begging. That's just how podcasts grow, and reviews and shares tell the platforms, hey, this is worth putting in front of more people. And if you know someone who's been feeling the world getting stranger lately, someone asking bigger questions, send this to them. Because we're not here to play games with people's souls. We're here to wake up, steady, things and steady up and see what's actually happening. John doesn't start with a baby in a manger. He starts with a cosmic headline. The Word was God. That's not poetry. That's an invasion of reality. And if the miracles in John are signs, then they aren't random. They're patterns. And patterns can be recognized even right now. The scariest part of John isn't Lazarus coming out of the tomb. It's realizing how many people are already entombed. People are starting to notice the world feels off. John's basically saying, you're not crazy. You're just finally paying attention. So here we go. Section 1, Gospel of John, supernatural signs, the word behind the world. And let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever noticed how John doesn't argue with skeptics? He doesn't stop to prove God exists. He doesn't ease anyone in gently. He just states reality like it's already settled and lets you catch up if you can. In the beginning was the Word. That's not an opening line. That's a pressure wave. John is saying there's something behind everything you see, a logic, a voice, a command structure. And that word didn't just create the world, it stepped into it. Flesh, bone, breath, dust on his feet. Here's where the Gospel of John's supernatural signs start to feel different than the rest of the books. John doesn't call them miracles most of the time. He calls them signs. And that matters. A miracle, it impresses you, right? A sign points you somewhere else. So when Jesus turns water into wine, John isn't saying, wow, look what he can do. He's saying, pay attention to who just gave the order. Creation didn't hesitate. And it sure as hell didn't negotiate. It didn't need a process. It recognized authority instantly. And that should mess with you just a little. Because if matter responds to him that easily, what does that say about the world we're walking through every day? What does it say about reality itself, right? This is where John quietly pulls the rug out from under modern thinking. We're taught the universe is mechanical, random, cold, just particles bouncing around, right? John says no. The universe is responsive and it listens. It reacts. It knows its maker. And lately, people are starting to feel that again. You hear it everywhere. Something's off. Things feel weird, heavier. Things feel weird. Why does it feel like everything's accelerating? That's a big one too. John's answer would be simple because the world isn't just physical. It never was. John isn't trying to prove God exists. He's assuming you live in his creation and daring you to notice that. Then John drops one of the most dangerous ideas in the Bible. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's not spiritual metaphor, folks. That's an invasion. And the intelligence behind the cosmos compressing himself into human limits, hunger, fatigue, pain, and death. Why? Because signs don't just reveal power, they reveal intent. And Jesus doesn't perform signs in John to dominate crowds. He does them to expose fault lines. Belief versus disbelief. Sight versus blindness. Life versus death and decay. On every sign forces a choice, and every sign forces a choice. You see this especially when Jesus heals. He just restores a man blind from birth, and suddenly the real blindness shows up in the people interrogating him. The sign isn't just physical healing, that's spiritual contrast. Who can see reality for what it is and who's invested in staying comfortable? John's saying, watch how people react to truth, because that reaction tells you everything. And we're back to the uncomfortable part. If the word really is holding everything together, like John claims, then ignoring him, it's not neutral. That's resistance. Quiet resistance, maybe. Polite resistance, okay? But resistance all the same. The miracles in John don't just reveal power, they expose where people draw the line between comfort and truth. We're not even to Lazarus yet. We're still at the foundation, and already John is whispering something unsettling. And that is that reality is alive, responsive, and ordered by the voice most people refuse to listen to. And if that's true, then the signs in John are ancient history. They're freaking warnings, folks. They're invitations. And they're setting the stage for something much bigger than a miracle story. Section 2, when death gets a command. Okay, so let's slow down, because this is where John stops being philosophical and starts being, I'll just say, dangerous. Up to this point, the signs have been disruptive. Water obeys, bodies heal, sight returns. That alone, you've been enough. That alone should have been enough to make people pause. But John knows something. If you really want to expose what someone believes about reality, you take them to the edge of death. That's why Lazarus matters. This isn't a random resurrection story dropped in for shock value, folks. John builds toward it carefully, and Jesus doesn't rush. He doesn't panic. He doesn't sprint to the tomb like he's late to an emergency. He waits. And that waiting is part of the sign, because from a human perspective, this is already over, and Lazarus is dead. Dead, wrapped, buried, decomposing. The sisters know it. The mourners know it. And the crowd knows it. Death has done its job. And that's exactly the point. John wants you to understand that when Jesus finally shows up, there's absolutely zero ambiguity left here. No wiggle room. No, maybe he wasn't really dead. This is not CPR. It's not adrenaline. This is authority walking into territory it doesn't technically belong to and taking over anyway. And Jesus doesn't hurry to Lazarus because he's not racing death. He's about to straight up confront it. When Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, he doesn't pray first. He doesn't talk permission or ask for permission. He doesn't negotiate. He commands, and death responds. That should unsettle you. It should reframe everything, because John isn't presenting death as the ultimate power. He's presenting it as a system that still answers to something higher. And here's where John twists the knife a little. Some people believe after seeing this, others immediately start planning how to kill Jesus right then. Same sign, same event, two completely different reactions. Why? because signs don't force belief, they force exposure. John is brutally honest about this. The closer Jesus gets to revealing who he really is, the more polarized the reactions become. There's no neutral ground anymore. You either recognize the authority that Jesus has, or you feel threatened by it. And if we're being real, that dynamic hasn't changed at all. Right now, people are desperate for life, not just survival. People need meaning and they want purpose, something that feels solid in the world that's glitching out. At the same time, there's an almost allergic reaction to the idea of divine authority. I see it all the time. Power is fine. Spirituality, it's trendy, right? But actual authority, that makes people really, really uncomfortable. And John saw this coming. The same miracle that makes some people believe, right, makes others reach for a weapon. Simple. Here's the quieter layer most people miss, though. Lazarus doesn't walk out on his own. He responds to a voice. And John is showing you that life isn't relational. It responds. It recognizes. It hears. And death doesn't get the final word, man. Folks, it gets interrupted. That has implications way beyond the grave. Because if Jesus can call a man out of a tomb, what else can he call out of hiding? Fear, trauma, addiction, generational patterns, spiritual numbness, things we've already labeled dead because we've lived them too long. John isn't promising comfort here. He's promising confrontation, and that confrontation is simple but brutal. If Jesus has authority over death, then pretending he's just a good teacher, that freaking doesn't work anymore, folks. That's why the signs escalate, because John isn't trying to convince you. He's narrowing the field. And we're about to hit the moment where Jesus stops doing signs altogether and starts explaining what they actually mean. Section 3, when the signs start talking back. This is where John tightens the circle, right? Up to now, the Gospel of John, supernatural signs have been doing the talking for Jesus. Water changes, bodies heal, death backs down. You could still, if you really wanted to, chalk it all up to power without identity, ability without authority, and a gifted man doing extraordinary things, right? So John doesn't let that last, though, because at a certain point, he stops being enough. Signs stop being enough. So Jesus starts explaining himself. And instead of saying, I was sent by God, or I represent God, he drops language that detonates the entire religious framework of the time. He says, I am. Not once, not twice, over and over and over. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. This isn't branding, folks. This is a claim to identity that reaches all the way back to Moses standing barefoot in front of a burning bush. John wants you to feel the weight of this, because every I am statement does something unsettling. It collapses distance. It removes the buffer between heaven and earth. God isn't just sending help, he's stepping forward himself. That's gravity, guys. He's stepping forward himself. And this is where people start getting uncomfortable fast. Like they just don't get it. Jesus doesn't say, I'll show you the truth. He says, I am the truth. That's not inspiration, folks. That's confrontation. Confrontation. The signs now have context. They aren't random power displays. They're demonstrations of identity. When Jesus feeds people, he claims to be the bread. When he opens blind eyes, he claims that he is the light. When he raises Lazarus, he claims authority over life itself. John is stacking evidence. He's just stacking it, not to prove a theory, but to force a decision. And here's the thing most sermons skip. Resistance doesn't come from the irreligious. It comes from experts. It comes from the experts, the leaders, the system managers, the ones who already know how God works. Because Jesus isn't disrupting people's beliefs. He's disrupting control. If he really is the I am, then no institution gets to manage access to him, folks. It's that simple. No tradition gets to shrink him down, and no authority structure gets to stand between his voice, and the listener. That's us, the listener. And do you understand how dangerous that is? That's why lately you see such strong reactions to John. Not just confusion, but irritation and mockery and dismissal. John doesn't leave. He doesn't leave room for a safe, symbolic Jesus. That's the way I'll put it. He presents a figure who either is exactly who he says he is, or is a threat to every system built on partial truth. People are fine with a powerful Jesus. They panic, though, when he claims authority. Imagine if we claimed authority. Here's the personal layer. John isn't just asking who Jesus is. He's asking who you think you are in relationship to him. Are you a spectator? A consumer? Like some sort of consumer? A fan of the philosophy, maybe? Or someone who recognizes a voice that actually carries weight. I mean, it carries all the weight, because once you hear the I am statements, neutrality, that straight evaporates. You're either moving towards him or you're backpedaling and creating distance. That's how I feel. And John is honest enough to tell you something else. From this point forward, the signs, they just slow down. Not because the power fades, but because the question has already been asked. Who do you say that I am? And once that question is on the table, the story doesn't need more miracles. It just doesn't. It needs a response. So now we go to the question you can't unhear. And here we are. John doesn't end his gospel with fireworks. He ends it with a mirror. After all the signs, after all the water, the blind eyes, the empty tombs, after the I am statements strip away every safe interpretation, John tells you exactly why he wrote this. So that you may believe. Let me say it again. So that you may believe, not admire, not debate, not bookmark it for later. Believe. And that's where the Gospel of John, supernatural science, stop being historical and start being personal, because John isn't asking if Jesus did these things. He's asking what you're going to do with the fact that he did. And right now, a lot of people feel like the ground is shifting. Trust in institutions is, man, it's at an all-time low. It's so thin. Narratives are collapsing. And frankly, for so many people, the future feels so unstable. And people are starting to notice that material explanations, I mean, with like the Epstein files and all this stuff, material explanations don't answer spiritual exhaustion. And that is not an accident, folks. John would say this moment has always been coming. And when the word steps into the world, everything gets clarified. Light shows up, and suddenly shadows don't get the benefit of ambiguity anymore. They can't hide. Things can't hide in the shadows. You see what's alive and you see what's dead, and you see what listens to the voice of God and what actually resists it. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. The signs in John weren't meant to convince everyone. Okay. They're just not meant to, none of this is meant to convince everyone. They were meant to reveal everyone. Some people saw Lazarus walk out of the tomb and leaned in, right? They leaned into it. Others saw the same thing and leaned towards violence. Same sign, different hearts. John doesn't soften that. He documents it. That's why this matters right now. Because we are living in a time when belief is being sorted quietly, internally, one decision at a time, not by miracles in the sky, but how people respond when truth presses in. This is Sunday supernatural setup, not entertainment. It's not hype. A weekly reminder that the unseen world is active and it's intelligent. And it's closer than most people are comfortable admitting. If this episode connected with you, help it travel around. Like it, share it, review it. All right? Leave a review. That's how the show grows. That's how this conversation, these conversations reach people who don't even know what they're looking for yet. And send this to a friend who says things like something feels off lately, but doesn't have language for why it feels off. Also, if you're a researcher, creator, or investigator working in Bible studies, the supernatural, suppressed history, or spiritual anthropology, that's what I'll call it, reach out. Quiet collaboration beats loud speculation every freaking time. We'll be back next Sunday with another sit rep. Same watch, same tension, deeper layers. Because once you hear the question John is asking, you don't really get to unhear it. Have a good week.
Before the dust had a name, before the stars learned their place, there was a sound in the silence, there was a voice before space. No cradle, no soft entrance, no halo lullaby, just fire wrapped in language, stepping down into time. You can call it myth, you can call it fate, but the stone still listen when he says wait. The word still speaks and the world still bends, water still listens, death still ends. Light cuts through what the dark defends. You can run from the truth, but the word still speaks. Blind man felt the sun for the very first time. Not just eyes opened, but the fault lines of mind. count the days, say it's over, say decay, but breath doesn't need permission, and death doesn't get the mic when the voice that formed the cosmos calls a name back into life. I am the door, I am the flame, I am the breath, I am the name. Say I'm a teacher, say I'm a lie, but don't look away when the dead reply. The word still speaks here and now, not in thunder, but it's loud. Truth doesn't beg, it doesn't preach.